Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that might surprise you. When you think of World War I, you probably picture soldiers in trenches, charging across no man's land, dodging bullets and artillery shells. But tonight, we're talking about a different kind of frontline warrior. The army cook. The guy responsible for feeding hundreds of starving men while shells are exploding overhead and the entire world is trying to kill everyone around him. And trust me, you would not want this job. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just been assigned as a field cook to the British Expeditionary Force somewhere in Belgium in 1916. The good news is you're technically not required to go over the top. The bad news is everything else about your existence for the next 2 years. You're responsible for feeding 250 men 3 times a day using equipment designed in 1875, ingredients that were questionable when they left England 3 months ago, and water that's probably going to kill someone. Oh, and you're doing all of this while German artillery tries to blow you into pieces. Welcome to the worst restaurant in human history. Chapter 1. Your new kitchen is a mud hole with delusions of grandeur. You arrive at your posting just before dawn. The transport truck drops you and 3 other cooks about half a mile behind the front lines, and immediately you hear it. The constant rumble of artillery. It never stops. Not during the day, not at night, not ever. It's like standing next to a perpetual thunderstorm, except this storm is specifically designed to turn human beings into paste. Your sergeant, a man who looks like he's aged 30 years in the past 6 months, points to what he calls the field kitchen. You're looking at a crater that someone has tried to turn into a cooking station. There's a canvas tarp stretched over wooden poles, already sagging with rainwater. Beneath it sits the pride of the British Army's catering corps, the No. 6 field cooker. This magnificent piece of equipment weighs about 400 pounds, burns anything you can stuff into it, and was designed by someone who clearly never had to use one. The cooker is basically a large metal box on wheels with 2 ovens and a boiler for water. In theory, it can cook for 250 men. In practice, it's a temperamental monster that requires constant attention, produces smoke that draws enemy fire, and breaks down approximately every 4 hours. There's no instruction manual. There's barely even instructions. You learn by watching the cook you're replacing, assuming he hasn't been killed yet. Your workspace is a trench about 6 feet deep and 12 feet long. The walls are reinforced with sandbags that are slowly dissolving in the constant rain. The floor is mud. Not dirt. Mud. The kind that sucks your boots off if you stand still too long. You will spend the next year of your life standing in this mud, breathing smoke, and trying not to get killed while you make breakfast. There's no running water here, no electricity, no refrigeration, no ventilation except whatever breeze manages to find its way into your hole in the ground. The nearest latrine is 30 yards away, which means every time nature calls, you're taking your life in your hands crossing open ground that the Germans like to shell randomly just to keep everyone nervous. Storage is a joke. You've got wooden crates stacked against one wall, covered with more canvas to keep the rain off. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. Everything is damp. Your flour has the consistency of paste. Your salt has dissolved into rocky chunks. Your tea leaves are growing something that might be mold or might be an entirely new form of life. Welcome to your new reality. Chapter 2. Morning begins at 3 a.m. because of course it does. Your day starts at 3 in the morning. Not because you want it to, because the men need to eat before they go on work detail or before a raid or before whatever fresh hell headquarters has planned for them today. You crawl out of your dugout, which is basically a hole carved into the trench wall with a bit of corrugated metal for a roof, and you stumble through the darkness to your field kitchen. The first job is getting the cooker lit. This sounds simple until you remember that everything is wet. The wood is wet. The coal is wet. Your matches are wet. The air itself feels wet. You stuff newspaper and kindling into the firebox, strike match after match, and pray something catches. On a good day, this takes 20 minutes. On a bad day, you're still trying to get the damn thing lit when the sun comes up and the men start lining up for breakfast they're not going to get. Once you finally get a fire going, you need to keep it going. This means constantly feeding it fuel while also trying to cook. You're juggling burning wood, hot metal, boiling water, and the knowledge that the smoke from your chimney is basically a giant arrow pointing at your location, telling every German artilleryman exactly where to aim. The sound of the fire is actually comforting in a weird way. It's a normal sound in the middle of absolute chaos. The crackle of burning wood, the hiss of water dripping onto hot metal. These are sounds from the regular world, from civilization, from a time when cooking food didn't involve the risk of sudden death. But then you hear the whistle, that distinctive sound of an incoming shell. You've got maybe 3 seconds to decide if you're going to dive for cover or keep stirring the porridge. Most times you keep stirring because if you don't, breakfast burns, and burned breakfast means 250 angry men who are already having the worst day of their lives. You've learned to tell the difference between shells that are going to land close and shells that are someone else's problem. It's not a skill you wanted to develop, but here we are. The cold at 3 in the morning is brutal. Your fingers are numb. Your feet are blocks of ice. The fire helps, but you can't stand too close or your front gets hot while your back stays frozen. You're wearing every piece of clothing you own. Uniform jacket, greatcoat, scarf, gloves with the fingers cut off so you can actually work. None of it is enough. Chapter 3, Breakfast is a crime against humanity served on a tin plate. Let's talk about what you're actually cooking. The menu doesn't vary much. Breakfast is porridge made from rolled oats, or as the men call it, burgoo. You dump oats into the boiler with water and a bit of salt. Stir it until it resembles wallpaper paste, and serve it hot. Hot is important because it's basically the only positive quality this food has. The oats come in 50-pound sacks that have been sitting in a supply depot somewhere in France for an unknown amount of time. When you open a fresh sack, things scatter. Weevils mostly. Little black beetles that have made your breakfast their home. You're supposed to sift the oats to remove the bugs. In practice, you do a quick visual check and figure the extra protein won't kill anyone. The men know. They pick out the bigger pieces of insect and eat the rest without comment. The water you're using comes from wherever the supply wagons could find it. Sometimes it's from a well. Sometimes it's from a stream. Sometimes it's from a shell hole that filled with rainwater 3 weeks ago and has been sitting there, slowly becoming a bacterial theme park. You're supposed to boil everything for at least 10 minutes to kill whatever microscopic horrors are lurking in it. You do your best, but you're feeding 250 men, and time is never on your side. You serve the porridge with bread and tea. The bread is hardtack biscuits that could double as building materials. These things are about 4 inches square, half an inch thick, and harder than woodwork. The official name is Army Biscuit No. 4, but everyone calls them toothbreakers. They're made from flour and water, baked until they're practically indestructible, and shipped in wooden crates with tin linings. In theory, they last forever. In practice, they arrive already infested with weevils who have set up entire civilizations inside them. The men have developed techniques for eating hardtack without breaking their teeth. Some soak them in their tea until they soften. Some smash them with their rifle butts and eat the crumbs. The really desperate ones just bite into them and accept the consequences. You hear the sound of hardtack breaking against teeth all morning long. Crack, crunch, curse. The tea is actually the highlight of the meal, which tells you everything you need to know about the food situation. You brew it strong and sweet because sugar is one of the few things in adequate supply. The men line up with their tin mugs, and you ladle out tea that's black as oil and sweet enough to make your teeth hurt. It's hot. It's got caffeine. It's not actively trying to kill anyone. By Frontline standards, it's practically luxury. Chapter 4. The men arrive and they are not happy. Around 4:30 in the morning, they start coming. A line of tired, dirty, cold, miserable men clutching tin plates and mugs. They shuffle forward through the mud, barely talking, most of them still half asleep. These are men who've been awake all night on sentry duty or men who just crawled out of dugouts where the rats were using them as climbing equipment. You know most of them by now. There's Private Collins who never complains about anything, even when his porridge has more weevils than oats. There's Sergeant Morrison, who complains about everything and has strong opinions about the proper way to brew tea. There's the kid everyone calls baby because he lied about his age to enlist and still doesn't look old enough to shave. He's 17. Maybe. They stand in line in the pre-dawn darkness, waiting their turn at the serving window, which is really just a gap in the canvas. You can see their faces in the firelight from your cooker. Hollow eyes, unshaven faces. That expression people get when they've accepted that life is just an endless series of terrible things happening one after another. You ladle porridge into their mess tins. Plop. The sound of semi-liquid oats hitting metal. It's not appetizing. It doesn't smell good. It barely qualifies as food. But it's hot and it's calories, and that's all that matters. You hand out the hardtack biscuits. 2 per man per meal. You pour the tea. The whole process takes about 90 minutes to feed everyone, and during that entire time, you're hyper-aware of the sound of distant artillery and the very real possibility that a shell could land right in the middle of the breakfast line. Some mornings the men are talkative. They joke about the food. They share cigarettes. They talk about letters from home or complain about officers or make plans for what they're going to do when the war ends. Other mornings, they're silent. Those are the mornings after bad nights, after raids that went wrong, after men didn't come back. You can tell just by looking at them how the night went. Your job is to be neutral, cheerful if possible, but at minimum neutral. You don't talk about the food quality. You don't complain. You just serve and try to make the portions as fair as possible and pretend that standing in a trench at 4:30 in the morning eating bug-infested porridge is a perfectly normal thing to be doing. Chapter 5. The rations arrive and they're already rotten. Twice a week, the supply wagon shows up with your rations. This is always an adventure because you never know what you're actually going to get. The British Army has a very specific list of what each man is supposed to receive per day. 1¼ pounds of fresh or frozen meat, or 1 pound of preserved meat. 1¼ pounds of bread or 1 pound of biscuit. 4 ounces of bacon. 3 ounces of cheese. 5/8 ounce of tea. 4 ounces of jam. 3 ounces of sugar. Half an ounce of salt. 1/36 of an ounce of pepper. That's the theory. The reality is you get whatever made it through the supply chain without being stolen, spoiled, lost, blown up, or redirected to some other unit that had better connections. Some weeks you get decent meat. Some weeks you get meat that's been dead so long it's starting to develop its own ecosystem. The meat comes in several varieties, all of them questionable. Fresh beef when you're lucky. Frozen mutton when you're less lucky. Canned corned beef, which the men call bully beef when things are normal. And when things are bad, you get something called McConaughey rations. These are tinned stews that contain meat and vegetables in a greasy brown liquid. The official description is optimistic. The reality is chunks of unidentifiable protein floating in lukewarm grease that tastes like sadness. You unload the supplies with help from whoever's available. Crates of tinned goods, sacks of flour and oats, boxes of tea, barrels of water. Everything is heavy. Everything is awkward. Everything has to be carried through the mud to your storage area while trying not to slip and drop 50 pounds of provisions into the trench floor where they'll be instantly ruined. The fresh meat is your biggest concern. It arrives wrapped in canvas and covered in flies. You need to use it immediately or it goes bad. But you can't use all of it immediately because you don't have enough storage for cooked food, so some of it inevitably spoils. You do your best to trim away the parts that are obviously rotten and use the rest. The men don't ask questions. They've learned not to. Sometimes you open a crate and find things that make you question the entire concept of military logistics. Tins with no labels. Jars of something that might be jam or might be industrial lubricant. Packages of biscuits that are already green with mold. Cheese that's developed a crust of something fuzzy and aggressive. You make judgment calls about what's safe to eat versus what needs to be thrown away, and you're wrong about 30% of the time. Chapter 6. Cooking lunch while the world explodes around you. Lunch preparation starts at 9 in the morning because feeding 250 men takes time and you've got limited equipment. Today's lunch is stew. It's always stew. Stew is the solution to every culinary problem in the trenches because you can throw literally anything into a pot, boil it until it's soft, and call it food. You start with the meat. Let's say today you got frozen mutton. It arrives as a solid block of ice with bits of sheep suspended in it. You have to thaw it first, which means leaving it near the fire while you do other things. Once it's thawed enough to work with, you discover it's about 40% bone and gristle. You hack away at it with a cleaver, trying to separate edible meat from the parts that would require industrial equipment to chew. The vegetables are next. You've got carrots, turnips, and potatoes. They arrive covered in dirt, which is actually preferable to arriving clean because dirt means they're probably fresher. You set up a washing station, which is a bucket of water and a lot of elbow grease. You scrub each vegetable, chop off the bad parts, and cut the rest into chunks roughly the same size so they cook evenly. Your cutting board is a plank of wood balanced across 2 ammo crates. Your knife is a standard kitchen knife that's been sharpened so many times it's wearing thin in the middle. You've got maybe 2 hours to prep lunch for 250 people, and every few minutes you have to stop what you're doing because a shell lands close enough to shake dirt from the trench walls into your stew pot. The actual cooking happens in a massive iron pot that hangs over the fire. You dump in the meat first with some water and let it start simmering. Then the vegetables. Then more water. Then salt and whatever dried herbs you can scrounge. The whole thing needs to cook for at least 2 hours to make sure everything is soft enough to eat and hot enough to kill bacteria. Stirring the pot is a full-time job. If you don't stir regularly, things stick to the bottom and burn. Burned stew tastes terrible, and the men will let you know about it. So you stir, and stir, and stir. Your arm gets tired. Your back hurts from standing in the same position. The heat from the fire is intense on your face and hands, but the rest of you is still cold because it's November in Belgium, and the temperature hasn't been above 40 degrees in weeks. While the stew cooks, you prep the bread. More hardtack because fresh bread is a distant dream. You count out biscuits. 2 per man. 500 biscuits total. You stack them in crates lined with clean canvas and try not to think about the weevils. Around 11:30, the German artillery starts up. This is normal. They like to shell the support trenches around lunchtime, probably because they know that's when people are moving around, getting food, generally being out in the open. You hear the whistle of incoming rounds. Some land close, some land far. You keep stirring because the alternative is serving raw mutton and nobody wants that. One shell lands close enough that you feel the concussion in your chest. Dirt rains down. Your ears ring. A piece of shrapnel pings off the side of your cooker with a metallic clang. You check the stew. It's fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. You keep stirring. Chapter 7. The water situation is a slow-motion poisoning. Let's talk about water because it's probably going to kill more men than German bullets. You need water for everything. Cooking, drinking, tea, washing dishes, washing yourself, though that happens approximately never. The problem is getting water that won't give everyone dysentery. The official supply comes in petrol cans. These are 2-gallon metal containers that were previously used for gasoline and have been cleaned to make them safe for drinking water. You can still smell the petrol. Everyone can. The water tastes like gasoline. You brew tea with it and the tea tastes like gasoline. You cook with it and the food tastes like gasoline. After a while, you stop noticing. But petrol cans only supply about half of what you need. For the rest, you have to improvise. There are wells scattered around the area, though most of them are contaminated with runoff from the latrines or worse. There are streams, though they're flowing through areas that have been fought over for months and probably contain human remains. There are shell holes that collect rainwater, though they also collect everything else including dead rats and gas residue. You're supposed to boil all water for at least 10 minutes before using it. You try. You really do. But you've got 3 fires going, 6 pots on the boil, and 250 men who need lunch in 90 minutes. Sometimes the water boils for 10 minutes. Sometimes it boils for 3 minutes. Sometimes you just hope for the best and pour it in. The water detail is one of the worst jobs in the unit. 2 men with a carrying pole and 4 petrol cans, trudging through the mud to the nearest water point, which is usually half a mile away. They make this trip 4 times a day. 8 cans per trip. 16 gallons of water weighing about 130 pounds total. Through the mud. Under sporadic shellfire. It's exhausting and dangerous and absolutely critical. You've developed a system for rationing water. Cooking gets priority, then tea, then cleaning. If there's anything left over, the men can wash. There's rarely anything left over. Everyone stinks. You stink. The food stinks. Everything smells like unwashed human mixed with mud and smoke and rot. Sometimes you get clean water and it's like a miracle. Clear, odorless, actually safe to drink. Those days are rare and precious. More often, you're working with water that's brown, smells questionable, and probably contains things that don't show up in any medical textbook. The men get sick constantly. Dysentery is epidemic. They call it the trots or the runs, or a dozen other colorful names. It's caused by bacteria in the water or the food or the mud or all three. Men lose weight. They become dehydrated. Some of them die from what basically amounts to drinking bad water. There's no real treatment except rest and clean water, and there's no such thing as rest in the trenches. Chapter 8. Your tools are older than your grandmother. The equipment you're working with was designed during the Victorian era and hasn't been updated since. Your main cooker is a number 6 field cooker, and it's held together with wire, hope, and the occasional prayer. The fire bricks inside are crumbling. The chimney is dented from shrapnel. One of the oven doors doesn't close properly, but it still works mostly, so you make do. You've got 2 large cooking pots, each capable of holding about 15 gallons. They're made of iron, weigh probably 40 pounds empty, and are blackened from years of use. There are dents all over them from being dropped or hit by flying debris. One has a crack in the side that you've patched with a piece of tin and some wire. Your cutting tools are basic. 1 cleaver, 2 kitchen knives, a sharpening stone that's wearing thin. You sharpen the knives every morning because dull knives are dangerous and also make prep work take twice as long. The cleaver is for hacking through bones and frozen meat. It's got chunks missing from the blade where you hit bone wrong or accidentally brought it down on the cutting board too hard. For serving, you've got a collection of ladles in various sizes and states of repair. The big ladle for stew holds about a pint and has a wooden handle that's charred black from being too close to the fire. The medium ladle is for porridge. The small ladle is for anything that's thick or chunky. You've also got a massive stirring paddle that's about 3 feet long and is used for stirring the big pots. Your arm gets very tired. Storage is wooden crates and barrels. The crates are for dry goods like flour, oats, rice, tea, sugar. The barrels are for anything liquid or semi-liquid. You've got to keep everything covered or the rats will get into it. The rats here are fearless. They're the size of small cats and they don't run away when you yell at them. They just sit there, staring at you, waiting for you to turn your back. You've got a few implements that you've improvised. A strainer made from an old ammo box with holes punched in the bottom. A rolling pin made from a broken shovel handle. A mortar and pestle fashioned from a German helmet and a rock. None of this is regulation. All of it is necessary. Cleaning your equipment is its own special nightmare. You need hot water, which means heating water, which means using fuel and time you don't have. You scrub pots with sand because there's no soap. You rinse with whatever water you can spare. You dry everything with rags that are never really clean. Hygiene is theoretical at best. The cooker itself requires constant maintenance. You clean out the ash box every morning. You check the fire bricks for cracks. You make sure the chimney isn't blocked. You oil the hinges on the oven doors. You tighten any bolts that have worked loose from the constant vibration of nearby shellfire. If something breaks, you fix it yourself because there's no repair service coming. Chapter 9. Dinner prep begins in the afternoon while you're still exhausted from lunch. Lunch service ends around 1 o'clock, and you've got maybe 30 minutes before you need to start prepping dinner. In that 30 minutes, you need to eat something yourself, though you usually don't have much appetite after spending 6 hours cooking and smelling food. You need to clean up from lunch. You need to check your supplies and figure out what you're making for dinner. Today's dinner menu is the same as yesterday's and the same as tomorrow's. More stew. Different meat if you're lucky, same meat if you're not. The routine is familiar by now. Pull out whatever meat you've got. Start defrosting if it's frozen. Get your vegetables washed and chopped. Get your pots ready. Light the fires. The afternoon shift is when things get dangerous. The Germans have figured out the Allied routine. Morning breakfast, midday lunch, evening dinner. They know when people are going to be gathered around the field kitchens, and they adjust their shelling accordingly. Between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, you're basically a magnet for artillery. You're chopping carrots when you hear it. That freight train sound of an incoming shell is headed your way. You drop flat on the ground, covering your head with your arms. The shell lands somewhere behind you. The explosion is massive. Shrapnel winds through the air. Dirt and debris rain down. Your ears are ringing so loud you can't hear anything else. You wait 10 seconds, 20. Then you get up, dust yourself off, and go back to chopping carrots. This is normal. This is fine. This is just another day at the field kitchen. The other cooks are handling their own tasks. Private Jenkins is manning the fires. He's good at it. Knows exactly when to add more fuel, when to pull back, how to maintain consistent heat. Corporal Davies is on water duty, making sure the boilers are full and nothing's boiling over. You're on prep, which means you're doing most of the actual cooking. The afternoon light is fading early because it's winter and the sun sets around 4:30. Soon you'll be working by firelight, and whatever illumination comes from the occasional star shell the Germans send up to light no man's land. Cooking in the dark is harder. You can't see what you're doing as well. You knock things over. You cut yourself more often. But you manage because the alternative is not feeding anyone. By 4 o'clock, you've got 3 pots going. One with stew. One with rice because you managed to get a sack of rice in the last supply delivery and you're trying to add some variety. One with water boiling for tea because tea never stops being necessary. The smell of cooking food attracts attention. Not just from the men who will be eating it, but from rats. Huge ones. They emerge from holes in the trench walls and creep closer, watching you with those intelligent black eyes. You've learned to keep a stick handy to swat at them when they get too bold. Sometimes you connect. Sometimes you miss. They always come back. Chapter 10. The dinner rush is controlled chaos. Dinner service begins at 5:30 and runs until about 7. This is the biggest meal of the day, or at least it's supposed to be. The men have been working all day, digging trenches, repairing barbed wire, standing sentry, doing 100 other tasks that keep them from getting killed. They're hungry, they're tired, they're cold. They want hot food and they want it now. The line forms early. Men start gathering around 4:30, even though you've told them 1,000 times that food won't be ready until 5:30. They don't care. They want to be first in line. They want to make sure they get their share. There's always an unspoken fear that maybe today there won't be enough food. Maybe the supplies didn't come. Maybe something went wrong. So they line up early and they wait. You start serving exactly at 5:30. Ladle of stew into the mess tin. Scoop of rice if they want it. 2 hardtack biscuits. Mug of tea. Next man. The line moves slowly because you're trying to make the portions equal and fair. Nobody gets more. Nobody gets less. The men watch you like hawks to make sure you're not playing favorites. The stew is thick and dark and smells better than it tastes. The meat is tender enough to chew without too much effort. The vegetables have dissolved into mush. The liquid is greasy and heavily salted. It's not good, but it's hot and it's filling, and that's all that matters. You hear the same comments every night. "What's the mystery meat tonight, Cookie?" Always said with a grin. "I think I found a piece of turnip in here." Delivered like it's a miracle. "This is the best worst food I've ever had." Said without irony. Some men eat standing in line because they don't want to wait. Some carry their food back to their dugouts where they can eat in relative privacy. Some sit in groups, sharing cigarettes and stories. The social dynamics of mealtime are fascinating when you pay attention. Who sits with who eats alone, who's chatty and who's silent. About an hour into service, the shelling starts again. Evening bombardment. Like clockwork. The men are used to it. They hunker down in the trench, holding their mess tins carefully so nothing spills. You keep serving. The line doesn't stop moving. Nobody panics. This is just life. One shell lands close enough that you feel the heat from the explosion. Your cooker rattles. Hot coals spill out of the firebox. You quickly shovel them back in with a flat piece of metal you use as a makeshift shovel. Keep serving. Don't stop. The men need to eat. By 7 o'clock, you've served everyone. There's always a little bit left over. Maybe a quart of stew. Some rice stuck to the bottom of the pot. You scrape it out and eat it yourself. It's lukewarm now and even less appetizing than when it was hot. But you need calories. You've been working for 16 hours straight. Your feet hurt. Your back aches. Your hands are covered in small cuts and burns. Chapter 11. Cleanup is its own form of torture. After dinner service ends, you face the worst part of the day. Cleanup. You've got pots crusted with burned food, ladles covered in grease, cutting boards that need scrubbing. And all of it has to be done with minimal water, no soap, and rapidly fading daylight. You start with the big pots. Scrape out as much of the leftover food as possible. The rats will eat it later, assuming the shells don't kill them first. Then you add water to the pot and heat it over the fire. Once it's hot enough to burn your hand if you're not careful, you start scrubbing with sand and a rag. Sand is your abrasive. You scoop it from the less muddy parts of the trench, pile it in the pot, and scrub in circular motions. The goal is to remove the layer of burned food without removing too much of the pot's surface. It's a delicate balance. Too little pressure and you don't get it clean. Too much pressure and you wear through the metal. The smaller items are easier, but there are more of them. Ladles, knives, the cutting board. Each one needs individual attention. You've developed a system. Scrape, rinse, scrub, rinse again. Check in the firelight to make sure you got everything. Repeat if necessary. Your hands are in water constantly. Cold water mostly because hot water is precious and you need to save it for tomorrow's cooking. Your fingers are wrinkled. The cuts on your knuckles sting. You've got burns on your forearms from reaching into the oven or getting too close to the fire. This is normal. Everyone who works in a field kitchen looks like they lost a fight with a cheese grater. The cooker itself needs cleaning. You pull out the ash box and dump the ashes somewhere downwind so they don't blow back in your face. You sweep out the firebox with a wire brush. You wipe down the exterior with a damp rag to remove the layer of soot and grease. It's never really clean. It's just less dirty than it was. Storage has to be reorganized. Crates need to be closed and covered. Barrels need to be sealed. Everything has to be put away properly or it'll be ruined by morning. Moisture gets into everything. Flour hardens. Sugar dissolves. Oats start to ferment. You've learned to check everything twice and trust nothing. The dishwater gets dumped in a designated spot away from the cooking area. It's thick with grease and bits of food. By morning, it'll be frozen solid. You'll have to break it up with a shovel and carry it further away because you can't have a pile of frozen garbage attracting rats right next to where you cook. Cleanup takes about 2 hours. By the time you're done, it's 9 o'clock and fully dark. The only light comes from distant star shells and the occasional flash of artillery on the horizon. You're exhausted, soaking wet from melted frost and dishwater. Hungry because you barely ate anything all day. And you get to do this all over again in 6 hours. Chapter 12. The night shift means preparing for tomorrow. Most people think your job ends after dinner cleanup. They're wrong. You've got night duties. Somebody has to prep for breakfast. Somebody has to maintain the fires. Somebody has to stand watch to make sure nothing gets stolen or blown up while everyone else is sleeping. Tonight, it's your turn for the late shift. You bank the fires so they'll stay alive until morning but won't burn through all your fuel. This is an art. Too many coals and you waste precious fuel. Too few coals and the fire dies and you'll spend an hour tomorrow morning trying to relight it. You start breakfast prep. Measure out oats into the big pot. Add water from the barrel. Let it sit overnight so the oats start to soften. This makes cooking faster in the morning and means the porridge is slightly less like eating paste. You count out hardtack biscuits. 500 again. Stack them in their crate. Cover everything with canvas. The night is quieter than the day but not silent. Artillery still rumbles in the distance. You can hear rifle fire from the front lines. Occasional machine gun bursts. The sounds are constant but you've learned to tune them out. What you listen for are changes in the pattern. More shooting than usual means something's happening. Less shooting is suspicious. Total silence is terrifying because it usually means something bad is about to happen. You do a supply inventory. Count your tins of meat. Check how much flour you have left. Estimate if you've got enough tea to make it to the next supply delivery. You keep a mental tally of everything because there's no paper system, no forms to fill out, just your memory and your best guess. The temperature drops significantly after dark. Your breath comes out in white clouds. The mud starts to freeze. Your feet are numb inside your boots. You've wrapped your hands in rags to keep them from getting frostbite, but it doesn't help much. You stamp your feet and swing your arms to keep blood flowing. Around midnight, you brew yourself a cup of tea. This is your one luxury. A cup of tea that you drink slowly, savoring the warmth, the sweetness, the brief moment of peace. You sit on an upturned crate, holding the hot mug in both hands, and just exist for 10 minutes. The rats come out at night. You see them moving in the shadows. Hear them squeaking and fighting over scraps. One bold specimen comes within 3 feet of you. It sits up on its haunches, watching you drink your tea. You stare back. Neither of you moves. Finally, it decides you're not interesting and wanders off to find actual food. By 2 in the morning, you're falling asleep on your feet. Your replacement is supposed to show up at 2:30 for the morning shift. You've got 30 minutes to stay awake and keep the fires from dying. You pace back and forth in the small area of your kitchen. You recite poetry you learned in school. You slap your face to stay alert. At 2:30, Private Jenkins arrives to start his shift. You give him a quick rundown. Fires are banked. Breakfast is prepped. Supplies are running low on tea and flour. He nods, takes his position. You stumble off to your dugout for exactly 3 hours of sleep before you have to do it all over again. Chapter 13. Your sleeping quarters are a hole in the ground. Your dugout is carved into the side of the trench wall about 15 feet from the field kitchen. It's 6 feet deep, 4 feet wide, and maybe 3 feet high. You can't stand up in it. You can barely sit up. It's essentially a horizontal grave with a corrugated metal sheet for a roof and some sandbags to keep the walls from collapsing. Your bed is a wooden pallet with a pile of straw on top. The straw is damp and moldy and home to various insects. You've got 2 blankets, one to lie on, one to cover yourself with. Neither is thick enough. You sleep in your uniform because taking it off means being even colder. Your boots stay on because taking them off means your feet might swell and you won't get them back on. The smell inside the dugout is spectacular. Imagine wet earth mixed with human body odor, mixed with mildew, mixed with rat droppings. That's your bedroom scent. You've stopped noticing it after the first week. Your nose has given up trying to process the information. You lie down on your pallet. Your back immediately reminds you that you're 35 years old and you've spent 16 hours standing and bending and lifting. Everything hurts. Your knees, your shoulders, your lower back. You've got a persistent ache in your right hand from stirring heavy pots all day. Sleep should come easily when you're this exhausted. It doesn't. Your mind is still racing, thinking about tomorrow's menu, worrying about whether the supply wagon will come, running through the mental checklist of tasks that need doing. Plus, there's the noise. Artillery never stops. It's like trying to sleep next to a construction site that's being shelled. You close your eyes, try to relax. Just as you're drifting off, a rat runs across your chest. You swat at it reflexively. It squeaks and runs away. You're fully awake now. You lie there, staring at the corrugated metal ceiling, listening to the rats moving in the walls, and try again to sleep. When you finally do drift off, your dreams are strange. You're cooking for thousands of people. The pots are overflowing. The men keep coming and you can't serve them fast enough. Or you're back home in your mother's kitchen and everything is clean and bright and the food actually tastes good. Those dreams are worse because you wake up and you're still in a hole in Belgium. You get about 2 hours of actual sleep. The rest is that weird state where you're not quite asleep but not quite awake. Your body is resting but your brain is still processing the day. You hear every sound. Feel every drop in temperature. Notice when the artillery pattern changes. At 5:30 in the morning, you wake up before your replacement even comes to get you. Your internal clock is calibrated to the cooking schedule now. You know it's time to start breakfast without even looking at a watch. You roll off your pallet, crawl out of your dugout, and start another day. Chapter 14. The Germans have cooks too, and sometimes they get along better than the soldiers. Here's something interesting that nobody talks about. The German field cooks are dealing with the same problems you are. They've got the same terrible equipment, the same questionable ingredients, the same impossible task of feeding hundreds of men in a war zone. And occasionally, in the quiet moments, there's a weird, sort of professional respect between you and them. You can see their field kitchen sometimes if you're brave enough to peek over the parapet. It's about 300 yards away. Similar setup to yours. Canvas tarp. Smoke rising from a cooker. Men lined up with their mess tins. They're having just as bad a time as you are. There was one morning back in December when both sides declared an unofficial truce for a few hours. Christmas morning. The shooting stopped. Men climbed out of the trenches and met in no man's land. Traded cigarettes and chocolate. Showed each other photographs of their families. And the cooks from both sides looked at each other with that universal expression of, "Can you believe we're doing this?" You didn't talk to them. Language barrier and all that. But you made eye contact with their head cook, a big German fellow with a mustache, and you both shook your heads and laughed. Because what else can you do? You're both trying to make edible food from garbage ingredients while the world explodes around you. That's a bond that transcends nationality. The truce didn't last. By noon, the officers on both sides had ordered everyone back to their trenches and the shooting resumed. But for a few hours, you weren't enemies. You were just cooks trying to do an impossible job. That memory sticks with you. There are other moments of strange connection. When your field kitchen gets hit by artillery and you have to move it, the German shelling stops for about an hour. Long enough for you to relocate. You know it's deliberate. Their cooks probably told their artillery officers to hold fire because they understand what it's like to lose your kitchen and have to rebuild. Professional courtesy between people who are technically trying to kill each other. You wonder sometimes what their rations are like. You've heard the German soldiers get better sausage than you get anything. You've also heard they're starving because the British naval blockade is cutting off their supplies. You don't know what to believe. Probably the truth is they're having a terrible time, same as you, just with different terrible food. Chapter 15, Sick Call means the doctor blames your cooking. Every morning after breakfast, the battalion doctor holds sick call in his dugout. Men line up with various ailments. Trench foot, dysentery, respiratory infections, shrapnel wounds, shell shock, and a significant percentage of them are sick because of something they ate or drank. Guess who gets blamed for that? The doctor is a tired Scottish man named Captain MacLeod who's been in France since 1914 and looks like he's aged 20 years in two. He's competent and thorough and deeply cynical about the entire war. He's also extremely vocal about the food situation. "Cookie," he says every time he sees you. "Your cooking is killing more men than the Germans. This is both unfair and partially true. You're doing the best you can with contaminated water and rotten meat and equipment from the Victorian era. But he's not wrong that the food is making people sick. Dysentery is rampant. Food poisoning is common. Malnutrition is universal. The problem is the supply chain. By the time food reaches you, it's been sitting in warehouses, loaded on ships, unloaded at docks, transported on trains, transferred to wagons, and hauled through the mud. Every step of that journey is an opportunity for contamination or spoilage. You can boil water and cook meat thoroughly, and it still might not be enough. There's also the chronic shortage of fresh food. No fresh vegetables except what you can scrounge locally. No fresh fruit ever. Everything is tinned or dried or preserved in ways that remove most of the nutritional value. The men are developing scurvy. Their gums bleed. Their teeth fall out. Their wounds don't heal properly. This is a disease from the age of sailing ships, and it's affecting soldiers in 1916 because nobody's getting enough vitamin C. The doctor has tried to get fresh food sent up to the front. He's written reports, made official requests, argued with supply officers. Nothing changes. The answer is always the same. Fresh food spoils too quickly. Transportation is limited. There are more important supplies that need to move. The men will have to make do. So they make do, and they get sick. And the doctor treats them with the limited medicines he has available. And he blames you because you're the one serving the food that's making them sick. It's not personal. It's just frustration with a system that's failing everyone involved. You've learned not to take it personally. When Captain McLeod complains about the food, you nod and agree and promise to do better, knowing full well that nothing is going to change. The food will still be terrible. The men will still get sick. The war will continue grinding everyone down regardless. Chapter 16. The supply wagon gets hit and everything gets worse. It's a Tuesday morning in late January when the supply wagon gets hit. You're not there when it happens, but you hear the explosion. Everyone hears it. A direct hit from German artillery on the road about a mile back. The wagon was carrying 3 days' worth of rations for your battalion. Flour, tea, tinned meat, sugar, all of it gone in a single explosion. The news reaches you around mid-morning. There will be no supply delivery today. Maybe not tomorrow either. They're trying to arrange alternate transportation, but there are no guarantees. In the meantime, you need to make your current supplies last as long as possible. You do an immediate inventory. 2 sacks of oats, maybe 50 pounds of flour, half a barrel of sugar, 20 tins of corned beef, some dried peas, a few pounds of rice, enough tea for maybe 3 days if you brew it weak. This needs to feed 250 men for an unknown period of time. The math is bad. You start rationing immediately. Breakfast portions get cut by a third. Lunch becomes a thin stew that's more water than food. Dinner is barely better. The men notice instantly. They don't complain much because they understand the situation, but you can see the disappointment in their faces. By the 3rd day without supplies, you're scraping the bottom of every barrel. The oats are gone. The flour is down to maybe 10 pounds. You're brewing tea so weak it's basically hot water with a memory of tea leaves. The men are hungry. Actually hungry, not just dissatisfied with the food quality. You start looking for alternatives. There's the abandoned farmhouse about half a mile away. You take 2 men and go scavenging. The place has been picked clean by earlier soldiers, but you find a few potatoes in the cellar. They're sprouting and soft, but they're edible if you cut away the bad parts. You also find some turnips in what used to be a garden. They're half frozen, but again, food is food. The local French civilians sometimes trade with British soldiers. You don't speak French and they don't speak English, but food is a universal language. You trade some of your precious tea rations for eggs. 6 eggs. For 250 men. You do the math and decide to use them to make the porridge slightly less awful. The men start hunting rats. This was inevitable. When you're hungry enough, a rat starts looking like protein. They roast them over small fires in their dugouts. You pretend not to know about it because officially you're supposed to stop them, but unofficially you understand. Hunger makes people do things they never thought they'd do. On day 5, a replacement supply wagon finally arrives. It's half the size of the normal delivery because supplies are running short everywhere. But it's something. You get oats, flour, a few tins of meat, tea. You can start feeding people properly again. The whole experience reminds you how fragile this entire operation is. You're 1 artillery shell away from starvation. 1 broken wagon away from disaster. The men trust you to feed them, but you're completely dependent on a supply chain that's held together with good luck and desperation. Chapter 17. Gas attacks mean cooking in a mask. The Germans introduced poison gas in 1915, and it changes everything. Now you have to worry about a threat you can't see, can't hear, and can't fight against with traditional weapons. And when the gas comes, you still have to cook because the men still need to eat. The first time you experience a gas attack, you're in the middle of making lunch. The alarm goes up. Bells ringing. Men shouting. Gas! 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 You grab your gas mask from where it hangs on your belt and pull it on as fast as you can. The mask is made of rubberized canvas with glass eyepieces and a filter canister. It's hot and claustrophobic and makes breathing difficult. You look around through the fogged-up lenses. The world has taken on a greenish tint from the gas. Chlorine probably, though you can't tell for sure. Men are stumbling around with their masks on, looking like insects with their bulging glass eyes. Some didn't get their masks on in time. They're coughing, gasping, being dragged to the medical station. Your field kitchen is still running. The fires are still going. The stew is still cooking. You have a choice. Abandon your post and take shelter, or keep cooking with the mask on. You keep cooking because if you don't, 250 men don't eat. Working in a gas mask is nightmare. Your vision is limited to what you can see through two small glass circles. Peripheral vision is gone. Depth perception is off. The mask fogs up from your breath and your own body heat. You keep having to wipe the inside of the lenses so you can see what you're doing. Breathing is difficult. Every breath has to be pulled through the filter, which creates resistance. You're already working hard, stirring heavy pots and lifting supplies. Now you're doing it while getting maybe 60% of the oxygen you normally would. You get tired fast, lightheaded. Your heart pounds. The heat is unbearable. You're standing next to fires that are putting out intense heat. You're wearing a rubber mask over your face. Sweat pours down inside the mask and pools at the bottom where it can't escape. It stings your eyes, runs into your mouth, makes the whole experience even more miserable. Communication is impossible. You try to talk to the other cooks, but the mask muffles everything. You resort to hand signals and pointing. Somehow you manage to keep cooking. The stew doesn't burn. The rice doesn't boil over. The tea gets made. The gas lingers for about an hour before dispersing enough that it's safe to remove the masks. When you finally pull yours off, your face is red and soaked with sweat. Your lungs are burning from the exertion. Your jaw aches from clenching it the whole time. But the food is ready and the men can eat. Gas attacks become a regular occurrence after that. Sometimes chlorine, sometimes phosgene. Later, the Germans start using mustard gas, which is even worse because it doesn't dissipate quickly and it burns any exposed skin. You learn to cook in your mask. It never gets easier, but you get better at it. Chapter 18. The lice are winning the war. Let's talk about the lice because they're everywhere and they're driving everyone insane. These aren't the tiny lice you might remember from school. These are body lice, bigger and more aggressive, and they live in the seams of your clothing where they feast on your blood and make your life miserable. You first notice them about 2 weeks after arriving at the front. An itching that won't stop. You scratch and it only gets worse. You check your shirt and find them. Little gray bugs about the size of a sesame seed. When you look at the seams, you see hundreds of them plus their eggs. You've got lice. Everyone has lice. It's not a question of hygiene or cleanliness. It's an inevitable consequence of living in close quarters with no way to wash your clothes properly. The lice spread from person to person through contact or shared spaces. Within days of arriving at the front, you're infested. The standard delousing method is to run a candle flame along the seams of your uniform, killing the lice and their eggs with heat. You do this every few days. It helps temporarily, but it doesn't solve the problem because you immediately get reinfested from someone else or from the bedding or from the general environment. The itching is constant. It's worse at night when you're trying to sleep. You scratch until you draw blood. The scratches get infected because everything gets infected in the trenches. You develop sores that won't heal. The lice bite you and leave red welts. You become a walking constellation of bites and scabs and inflammation. Working in the field kitchen with lice is its own special torture. The heat from the fires makes the lice more active. They move around in your clothing, biting as they go. You're trying to cook, and all you want to do is strip off your uniform and burn it. But you can't, so you suffer. The men talk about the lice constantly. They've got nicknames for them. Chats, cooties, arithmetic because they multiply so fast. Conversations in the trenches often revolve around lice-related suffering. How many did you kill today? Found a big one in my armpit. I think they're evolving. There are rumors about soldiers who went mad from the lice. Men who couldn't take the constant itching and scratching and biting. Men who stripped naked in the middle of winter and had to be restrained. You believe these rumors because you understand exactly how someone could reach that breaking point. The only real solution is to get sent back to a rest area where there are delousing stations with baths and clean clothes. This happens maybe once every few months if you're lucky. You get to remove your lice-infested uniform, bathe in hot water with harsh soap, and put on a clean uniform. Feels like heaven for about 6 hours. Then you go back to the front and get reinfested immediately. Chapter 19. The mud is not just mud. People who've never been in the trenches think mud is just mud. Dirt plus water equals mud. right? Wrong. The mud in the trenches is a special kind of hell that defies normal description. Thick, sticky, it's everywhere, and it's probably going to kill you eventually. The mud in your field kitchen area is about 6 inches deep on a good day. On a bad day, after heavy rain, it's knee-deep. It's not the kind of mud you can just wipe off. It's clingy, adhesive. It sucks at your boots with every step. When you pull your foot up, the mud makes a sound like someone's dying. This mud contains everything. Human waste from the latrines that overflow when it rains. Blood from wounded men. Decomposing matter from things you don't want to think about. Probably some chemical compounds from the gas attacks. All of it mixed together into a thick gray-brown sludge that squelches under your feet. Working in the mud is exhausting. Every movement requires extra effort. You're carrying a 20-pound pot of water. In normal conditions, that's heavy but manageable. In knee-deep mud, it's an epic struggle. Your legs burn from the constant effort of pulling your feet free. Your boots get heavier as the mud builds up on them. The mud gets into everything. Your food, your water, your equipment. You try to keep things covered, but it doesn't matter. Mud finds a way. You're constantly cleaning things that immediately get muddy again. It's like trying to stay dry in the ocean. The worst part is when someone falls in the mud. It happens regularly. You slip on a duckboard or lose your footing while carrying supplies. You go down face first into the mud. For a moment, you're completely submerged in this toxic sludge. You can't breathe. You can't see. You panic and flail and somehow get upright again. You're covered head to toe in mud. It's in your mouth, in your eyes, in your ears. You taste it for days. At night, the mud freezes. This is both better and worse. Better because you can walk on the frozen surface without sinking. Worse because now everything is slippery and treacherous. You're carrying hot pots across ice and trying not to fall and spill boiling water on yourself or others. The mud contributes to disease. Trench foot is caused by standing in cold, wet mud for days at a time. Your feet turn white and numb. The flesh starts to rot. Without treatment, you can lose your toes or your entire foot. The mud also harbors tetanus bacteria. Any cut or scrape that gets exposed to the mud can become infected. Men die from infections that started as tiny wounds. You've learned to accept the mud as a permanent feature of your life. You'll never be fully clean again. You'll never have dry feet. You'll never escape the constant squelching and sucking sounds of mud in motion. This is your reality now. Chapter 20 Mail call is the best and worst part of the week. Once or twice a week, the mail comes up from the rear. A soldier arrives with a canvas sack full of letters and packages from home. The entire battalion stops what they're doing and gathers for mail call. This is the most important event of the week. The mail caller reads out names. Private Anderson. Anderson pushes through the crowd to collect his letter. Corporal Brown. Brown's face lights up when he hears his name. Private Collins, you've got a package. The crowd cheers because packages usually contain food, and Collins is known for sharing. You get mail too. Not as much as some of the younger men who have wives or sweethearts writing regularly, but your mother sends letters every few weeks. Her handwriting is familiar and comforting. She writes about the weather back home, what the garden is producing, neighborhood gossip. Normal things from a normal world that feels impossibly far away. Sometimes she sends packages. Socks that she knitted. Hard candy in a tin. Cigarettes purchased from the shop. Once she sent a small fruitcake that survived the journey mostly intact. You ate it over the course of a week, making it last as long as possible because it tasted like home. The men who get mail are visibly happier for days afterward. They read their letters over and over. They share news from home with their friends. My wife says the baby took her first steps. My girl says she's waiting for me. My dad says the harvest was good this year. These small connections to home are what keep people sane. The men who don't get mail are heartbreaking to watch. They stand there as names are called, hoping to hear their own. When the mail caller finishes and they haven't received anything, their faces fall. Some of them try to hide their disappointment. Others don't bother. You see them walking away, shoulders slumped, and you know they're wondering if anyone back home still thinks about them. You've started writing letters to some of the men who never get mail. Nothing much, just a few lines saying you hope they're well, that you're thinking of them. You sign them from a friend and put them in with your own outgoing mail. When these men receive letters from a mysterious friend, they brighten up. They don't know it's you. That's fine. The point is that someone cares enough to write. The worst part of mail call is when letters arrive for men who've been killed. The mail caller doesn't always know who's dead and who's alive. He calls out a name and there's silence. Someone has to step forward and explain that Private Johnson was killed last week. The letter gets returned unopened. Somewhere back home, someone is writing letters to a person who will never read them. Chapter 21. The cold is a constant enemy. Winter in Belgium is brutal. The temperature drops below freezing and stays there for months. Everything is cold. The ground, the air, the water, your body. There's no escape from it. Your field kitchen provides some warmth from the fires, but it's not enough. You're warm on the side facing the fire and frozen on the side facing away. You rotate constantly trying to even out the temperature. Your hands are the biggest problem. They're in and out of cold water constantly. They're exposed to the cold air. They get numb until you can barely feel what you're holding. The men suffer even worse than you do. They're standing guard in exposed positions. They're sleeping in dugouts that offer minimal protection from the elements. They're wearing uniforms that aren't designed for this kind of cold. Frostbite is common. Hypothermia kills people. The water situation gets critical in winter. Your supply barrels freeze solid overnight. You have to break the ice with an axe before you can get to the liquid water underneath. Sometimes the ice is so thick there's almost no liquid water left. You melt ice over the fires, which takes time and fuel you don't have. Food freezes too. The stew you made for dinner turns into a solid block by morning. You have to reheat it, which means more fuel consumption. Bread becomes so hard it's difficult to cut even when it's not frozen. The hardtack biscuits, already nearly indestructible, become actual weapons when frozen. Your cooking equipment behaves differently in the cold. Metal becomes brittle. Things crack or break that would normally be fine. Water doesn't boil as quickly. Food doesn't cook as evenly. Everything takes longer and requires more effort. The men need more calories in winter to maintain their body temperature. They need hot food more frequently. But your supply situation doesn't change to account for this. You still get the same rations regardless of the weather. So you try to make the food as hot as possible and serve it as quickly as possible so it doesn't cool down while they're eating. You develop techniques for staying warm. Layer your clothing. Keep moving. Drink hot tea constantly. Huddle near the fires whenever possible. Sleep in all your clothes, including your boots. None of it is enough. You're cold all the time. The cold becomes your baseline state of existence. Ironically, the cold preserves food better. Your meat doesn't spoil as quickly. Your bread lasts longer. These are small blessings in an otherwise miserable situation. You take what advantages you can get. Chapter 22. The wounded come through and suddenly your job seems less terrible. Your field kitchen is positioned near one of the routes that stretcher-bearers use to evacuate wounded men from the front lines. You see them coming through regularly. Men on stretchers, walking wounded supporting each other. Medical orderlies doing their best with limited supplies. The first time you see a badly wounded man, it shakes you. His leg is mostly gone. What's left is wrapped in bloody bandages that are already soaking through. He's conscious and crying. Not from pain, though that must be unbearable. From fear. He's crying because he knows his life just changed forever. You learn to keep working when the wounded come through. You can't help them. You're not a medic. Your job is to keep cooking so the men who are still fighting have something to eat. But you see them. You make eye contact. Sometimes you pour them a cup of hot tea if they're conscious enough to drink it. The medical station is about 30 yards from your kitchen. You hear the screams. The sounds of men in agony that no amount of morphine can fully suppress. The sound of the surgeon working. The sound of men dying despite everyone's best efforts. These sounds become part of your daily soundtrack along with the artillery. One afternoon, a young soldier stumbles into your cooking area. He's been shot in the shoulder. He's bleeding badly, but he's still on his feet. He looks at you with confused eyes and says, "I need to sit down." You help him sit on a crate. You yell for a medic. You press a cloth against his wound to slow the bleeding. The medic arrives and takes over. The soldier is evacuated. You never learn if he survived. The wounded remind you that your job, as terrible as it is, isn't the worst job in the trenches. You're not going over the top. You're not clearing barbed wire under machine gun fire. You're not sitting in a listening post waiting to be raided. You're just cooking. It's dangerous and exhausting and miserable, but it's not the worst thing happening here. You start to appreciate what you have. You've got shelter, mostly. You've got access to food, even if it's terrible food. You're not getting shot at directly most of the time. When you see a man with both legs blown off, your complaints about standing in cold water all day seem petty. The medical personnel become your heroes. The doctors working in impossible conditions. The nurses who somehow maintain their composure while dealing with horrors that would break most people. The stretcher bearers who run into danger to rescue wounded men. These people are doing real work. Life-saving work. You're just making porridge. Chapter 23. Leave finally comes and civilization feels alien. After 8 months at the front, you finally get leave. 7 days away from the trenches. You'll go back to a rest area behind the lines. There are rumors of hot baths, clean clothes, real beds, food that doesn't taste like it's already decomposing. You can barely believe it's real. The journey to the rest area takes most of a day. You travel in the back of a truck with a dozen other men who are also on leave. Everyone is quiet at first. Then someone makes a joke. Someone else laughs. Suddenly everyone is talking and laughing and making plans for what they're going to do with their 7 days. The rest area is a small French town that's been converted into a military facility. There are barracks, mess halls, recreation areas, and most importantly, there's a bathhouse. You haven't had a proper bath in 8 months. You've washed when you could with cold water and a rag, but it's not the same. You're about to experience actual cleanliness. The bathhouse is glorious. You strip off your lice-infested uniform and hand it to an orderly who immediately takes it away to be burned. You step into a tub of hot water and it's the best thing you've felt in months. The water is actually hot. There's actual soap. You scrub and watch the water turn gray from all the accumulated dirt. You soak for probably an hour. Other men come and go. Everyone has the same blissful expression. This is what civilization feels like. This is what normal life is like. You'd almost forgotten. After the bath, you get a clean uniform. It's rough and scratches your skin, but it's clean. No lice, no mud stains, no smell of smoke and rot. You put it on and you feel like a new person. The mess hall serves real food. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, vegetables that aren't from a tin, butter. Real butter, not the rancid lard you've been using. You eat until you're uncomfortably full. Then you have dessert. Pudding. Actual pudding with actual sugar. The first night you sleep in a real bed with sheets and a pillow. The mattress is thin and the room is crowded with bunks. But it's not a hole in the ground. It's not damp. There are no rats. You lie there in the darkness and almost cry from the simple pleasure of being dry and relatively comfortable. The next few days blur together. You sleep a lot. You eat as much as possible. You walk around the town and see French civilians going about their normal lives. Children playing. Shopkeepers selling goods. People complaining about ordinary problems like the weather or the price of bread. It's jarring to see normal life continuing while a war rages a few miles away. You visit a cafe and order coffee. Real coffee, not the ersatz nonsense you've been drinking. The strong and bitter and perfect. You sit there for 2 hours drinking coffee and watching people and trying to remember what it felt like to be a normal person. On day 6, you start getting anxious. Tomorrow you have to go back. Back to the mud and the cold and the terrible food and the constant danger. The thought of it makes you physically ill. You consider deserting, just walking away and never going back. But you don't. You couldn't live with yourself. On day 7, you report for transport back to the front. The truck is waiting. Other men are climbing aboard. their faces showing the same dread you feel. You take one last look at the town, at normal life, at civilization. Then you climb into the truck and head back to hell. Chapter 24. The war ends, but the damage is permanent. November 11th, 1918. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The armistice takes effect and the shooting stops. After 4 years of industrialized slaughter, the war is over. You're still alive. You're one of the lucky ones. The silence is deafening. You've become so accustomed to the constant artillery that when it stops, the absence of sound is almost painful. Men emerge from the trenches, looking around in confusion. Is this real? Is it actually over? The celebration is subdued. Everyone is too exhausted for wild celebration. There's relief, yes, gratitude to still be alive, but also a profound weariness and a sense that nothing will ever be the same. You cook one final meal in the field kitchen. Stew same as always, but this time you know it's the last one. There's something bittersweet about stirring that pot for the final time. This terrible job has been your life for 2 years. You've hated every minute of it, but it's also given you purpose and kept you busy and possibly kept you sane. The men line up one last time. You serve them same as you have 1,000 times before, but today there's no artillery in the background. No risk of gas attack. No fear that a shell might land in the middle of the meal line. Just men eating food and knowing that they survived. Demobilization takes months. You can't just leave. There are procedures, paperwork, waiting for transport. You spend the winter of 1918 to 1919 still in Belgium, still cooking, but now for an army that's winding down rather than fighting. Finally, in March 1919, you get your discharge papers. You're going home. You pack your few belongings. You say goodbye to the men you've served with. Some of them you'll stay in touch with. Most you'll never see again. The journey home feels surreal. You travel by train across France. You cross the Channel to England. You take another train to your hometown. Everything looks smaller than you remember. The streets are narrower. The buildings are shorter. Or maybe you've just changed. You arrive home and your mother cries when she sees you. You're thin. You're older than you should be. You've got scars and a persistent cough from all the smoke inhalation. But you're alive. Adjusting to civilian life is harder than you expected. The sounds bother you. Sudden noises make you flinch. Fireworks on Guy Fawkes Night send you into a panic attack. You can't sleep in a normal bed because it feels too soft, too exposed. You end up sleeping on the floor for months. Food tastes wrong. Everything tastes wrong. Your mother makes a lovely roast dinner and you can barely eat it. The flavors are too strong, too rich. Your stomach has forgotten how to process real food. You subsist on tea and toast for weeks until your body readjusts. You can't explain what it was like to people who weren't there. They ask questions. Was it exciting? Did you kill anyone? What was it like? You don't have answers that would make sense to them. How do you explain standing in mud for 2 years? How do you describe the smell of rotting food mixed with gas and blood? You can't. So you don't try. You find work as a cook in a hotel. It's not exciting, but it's clean and safe and nobody is trying to kill you. You have a proper kitchen with running water and electricity and food that isn't infested with weevils. It should feel like a dream come true. Mostly it just feels empty. Chapter 25. The Long Shadow. Decades pass. The war becomes history. The men who fought in it become old men, sitting in parks, wearing their medals, attending remembrance ceremonies. You're one of them now. You never talk about your time as a field cook. When people ask what you did in the war, you say you were in the catering corps. They usually lose interest. Cooking isn't heroic. It's not exciting. Nobody writes books about field cooks or makes movies about them. That's fine with you, but the memories never fade. You're 85 years old and you can still remember the exact smell of the field kitchen, the sound of artillery, the taste of hardtack biscuits, the feeling of cold water on your numb hands, the faces of the men you fed, many of whom didn't survive. You have nightmares occasionally. You're back in the trenches. The cooker won't light. The men are lining up for food, but you have nothing to give them. The shells are falling and you can't take cover because you have to keep stirring. You wake up sweating and disoriented in your comfortable bedroom, taking several minutes to remember that the war ended 60 years ago. You attend the annual Armistice Day ceremony. There are fewer veterans each year. The young people listen politely to the speeches, but you can tell they don't really understand. How could they? They've never been hungry, never been cold, never stood in mud while the world exploded around them. A young reporter interviews you for the local paper. She's writing a piece about the last surviving veterans. She asks you what you remember most about the war. You think about it carefully. You could mention the danger, the exhaustion, the terrible conditions. All of that would be true, but what you remember most is simpler than that. The tea, you tell her. I remember making tea for the lads. Thousands of cups of tea over 2 years. It wasn't much, but it was hot and sweet, and it gave them a few minutes of comfort. That's what I remember. She writes it down, though you suspect she's disappointed. She probably wanted stories about battles or bravery, but that's the truth. Your war wasn't fought with rifles. It was fought with pots and ladles and determination to keep men fed in impossible conditions. You've outlived most of the men you served. You've outlived 2 wars, actually. You survived the Second World War II, though you were too old to serve. You've seen unimaginable changes. Cars, airplanes, television, computers. The world has transformed completely. But sometimes, when you smell smoke from a neighbor's bonfire, you're right back there, standing in the mud, stirring the pot, listening to the artillery, serving food to tired, scared young men who trusted you to keep them alive. It was the hardest thing you ever did. And in some strange way, it was the most important. You don't work alone. There are 4 cooks assigned to your field kitchen. You've become closer to these men than you ever were to your own brothers. When you spend 18 hours a day in a hole in the ground with someone, sharing the same dangers and miseries, bonds form whether you want them to or not. Private Jenkins is the senior cook. He's been here since 1914, which makes him practically ancient by Frontline standards. He's 38 years old but looks 60. He worked as a chef in a London hotel before the war, and he's got actual culinary training. He knows proper technique, proper knife skills, proper seasoning, none of which matters when you're cooking rancid mutton in a trench, but he maintains his standards anyway. He insists on tasting everything before it's served. He adjusts the salt. He schemes the scum off the stew. He treats army cooking like it's fine dining, and you respect him for it. Corporal Davies is the opposite. He'd never cooked a meal in his life before joining up. He was a coal miner from Wales. Big man, strong as an ox. Not particularly bright, but absolutely reliable. His job is the heavy lifting, hauling water, moving supply crates, chopping wood for the fires. He doesn't complain, doesn't question orders, just does the work. You've seen him carry 2 full water cans, 80 pounds total, through knee-deep mud without breaking a sweat. Private Murphy is the youngest at 22. Irish lad from Dublin with a quick wit and a talent for scrounging. When supplies run short, Murphy somehow finds things. Extra tea from another unit. A sack of potatoes from a French farmer. Once he came back with a live chicken. Nobody asked where he got it. You made chicken stew that night, and the men talked about it for weeks. Murphy also handles the fires. He's got a gift for keeping them burning efficiently, even in the rain. Then there's you. You're the one who does most of the actual cooking. The recipe planning, such as it is. The timing. The organization. Jenkins oversees everything, but you're the one stirring the pots and making sure nothing burns. You work together like a machine. Each person knows their role. There's rarely any discussion needed. Jenkins checks the supplies and decides the menu. You start prep. Davies hauls whatever needs hauling. Murphy gets the fires going. Everyone works in parallel, moving around each other in the cramped space without getting in each other's way. The bond between you is unspoken but deep. You've saved each other's lives multiple times. When a shell landed close and buried Davies under rubble, you and Murphy dug him out. When you caught dysentery and couldn't work for 3 days, they covered your shifts without complaint. When Murphy took shrapnel in his leg, Jenkins carried him to the medical station. You know everything about these men. Jenkins has a wife and 3 daughters back in London. He writes to them every Sunday without fail. Davies was engaged before the war, but his fiancée married someone else. He doesn't talk about it, but you know it destroyed him. Murphy has 6 siblings, and he's the only one who enlisted. He sends most of his pay home to his mother. You share everything. Cigarettes, letters from home, the occasional bottle of rum that gets passed around. Your hopes and fears and the dark humor that keeps you sane. Late at night, when the work is done, you sit around a small fire and talk about what you'll do when the war ends. Jenkins wants to open his own restaurant. Davies wants to go to America. Murphy wants to marry a nice Irish girl and have 10 children. You mostly just want to sleep in a real bed and eat food that doesn't taste like despair. The 4 of you have developed your own language. Shorthand communication that outsiders wouldn't understand. A grunt means add more water. A whistle means incoming shell. A particular look means the food is beyond saving but serve it anyway. You can predict what each other will do before they do it. Arguments happen. Of course they do. For men in a high-stress situation, exhausted and scared, living in filth. Murphy and Davies got into a fistfight once over whose turn it was to go on water detail. It lasted about 30 seconds before Jenkins pulled them apart and put them both on latrine cleaning duty. They've been best friends ever since. You've also developed rituals. Every morning, the first cup of tea goes to Jenkins. It's tradition. Every night, Murphy says a prayer before bed. He's not particularly religious, but his mother asked him to, and he honors that. Davies always sharpens the knives before starting work, even if they don't need it. You always check the fires one last time before sleeping, even when it's someone else's turn to watch them. These men are the reason you haven't gone insane. When the shells are falling and you're convinced you're going to die, their presence steadies you. When you're so tired you can barely stand, their example keeps you going. When you wonder what the point of any of this is, you remember that you're feeding them and the men who depend on all of you. If you survive this war, you know you'll never see them again. You come from different worlds, different countries even, but right now, in this trench, in this moment, they're the most important people in your life. Chapter 27. The smells become your reality. Let's talk about the smell because it's one of the things that defines your existence and will haunt you for the rest of your life. You've become nose blind to most of it, but occasionally you'll catch a whiff of something and it all comes rushing back. The baseline smell is mud. Wet earth mixed with decomposition. It's everywhere and constant. On top of that, there's the smell of unwashed men. 250 soldiers who haven't bathed in months. Sweat and body odor and feet that should probably be classified as biological weapons. This smell intensifies when the men crowd around the field kitchen for meals. Then there's the latrine smell. The toilets are just holes in the ground with wooden seats. They're supposed to be emptied regularly. They're not. The smell of human waste is pervasive, especially when the wind blows from that direction. In summer, it's worse. The heat intensifies everything. Your field kitchen adds its own aromatic contributions. Burning wood and coal produce smoke that's not unpleasant on its own, but it mixes with everything else. The smell of cooking food should be appetizing. It's not. When you're boiling questionable meat and old vegetables, the smell is more concerning than inviting. Sometimes you're cooking something and you can't tell if it smells bad because it's actually bad or because everything smells bad. The diesel from the petrol cans leaches into everything. Water that tastes like gasoline. Tea that smells like fuel. You've gotten used to it, but new arrivals gag when they try the tea for the first time. What did you put in this? They ask. Water, you tell them. They don't believe you. Gas attacks add their own smell. Chlorine gas smells sharp and acrid, like bleach mixed with pepper. Phosgene smells like freshly mown hay, which is almost worse because it seems pleasant until you realize it's melting your lungs. Mustard gas smells like garlic or horseradish. These chemical smells linger for days after an attack, mixing with all the other smells. Blood has a distinct metallic smell. When the wounded come through, you smell it. Lots of it. Combined with the smell of torn flesh and internal injuries that you don't have words for. The medical station is close enough that these smells drift into your cooking area regularly. Death has a smell too. In the heat of summer, bodies decompose quickly. Sometimes men die in no man's land and can't be recovered. They lie there, rotting. The smell carries on the wind. You're trying to cook lunch and the smell of decomposing humans fills your nose. You keep cooking because what else can you do? Then there are the weird smells. The horses that pull supply wagons smell like horse. Their manure adds to the general miasma. Cordite from artillery shells smells sharp and chemical. Wet canvas smells musty. Tobacco smoke is everywhere because every man who can get cigarettes smokes constantly. Your own smell is something you try not to think about. You smell like smoke and sweat and grease and mud. Your uniform smells like it's been worn by 3 people before you, which it probably has. Your hands smell like onions and meat and dishwater. No amount of washing removes it. The smell gets into your dreams. You wake up and your first thought is always about the smell. It's there before you even open your eyes. There's no escape from it. No fresh air. No clean space. Just layers upon layers of odor building up over months. Certain smells become triggers. Years after the war, you'll smell diesel fuel at a garage and immediately you're back in the trenches. You'll smell wet earth in your garden and your heart rate spikes. Hospitals smell like the medical station and you have to leave. Smoke from any source makes you anxious. But there are a few good smells. Tea brewing is comforting. The first smell in the morning that promises warmth and caffeine. Fresh bread, on the rare occasions you get it, smells like heaven. Coffee, even rarer, smells like civilization. These small olfactory pleasures become enormously important. You've learned to breathe through your mouth when things get really bad. During gas attacks with your mask on. When emptying the grease trap. When the latrines overflow. Mouth breathing doesn't eliminate the smell, but it reduces it. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Chapter 28. The sounds never stop. The artillery is the baseline. The constant rumble of guns firing in the distance. Some days it's far away, like thunder on the horizon. Other days it's close enough to shake your fillings loose. But it never stops. Not for meals. Not for sleep. Not for anything. Your brain has learned to filter it out as white noise, but it's always there. Then there are the distinct sounds of incoming shells. The whistle that gets higher in pitch as it gets closer. You've learned to judge distance by sound. A shell that's going to land far away sounds almost peaceful. A shell that's going to land close makes your stomach clench. A shell that's headed directly for you gives you maybe 2 seconds to throw yourself flat. You've become an expert at reading these sounds. The explosions themselves vary. High explosive shells make a sharp crack followed by the sound of shrapnel whining through the air. Gas shells make a duller thud. When a shell lands in mud, it makes a wet crumping sound. When it lands on something hard, the explosion is sharper and louder. Each type of explosion tells you something about what's happening and how much danger you're in. Machine gun fire is distinctive. A stuttering rattle that comes in bursts. German machine guns sound different from British ones. The German MG08 has a higher rate of fire. The British Vickers is slower and deeper. You can tell who's shooting and roughly where just by the sound. Rifle fire is constant from the front lines. Single shots. Volleys. The crack of a sniper's rifle. At night it gets heavier because that's when patrols go out and raids happen. Sometimes you hear volleys of rifle fire followed by silence and you know someone just died. Your field kitchen produces its own symphony of sounds. The crackle of the fire is constant. The hiss of water dripping onto hot metal. The bubble and pop of stew boiling. The scrape of your ladle against the pot. The clang of metal on metal when you're moving pots around. These are your working sounds, the background to your day. The men make sounds too. Talking in line for meals. Complaining about the food, always good-natured. Coughing, spitting, sneezing. The general cacophony of hundreds of men living in close quarters. Their boots sucking in the mud. The jingle of equipment. The scratch of matches being lit. Water sounds are everywhere. Rain hitting the canvas tarp. Dripping from 100 different sources. Sloshing in your cooking pots. The splash when you dump dirty dishwater. In winter, the crack of ice breaking, the drip of melting frost. Rats make surprisingly loud sounds for their size. You hear them scratching in the walls, fighting over food, squeaking when threatened, their tiny claws clicking on wood. Sometimes at night you hear a splash when one falls into a water barrel and drowns. Human sounds of suffering are common. Men coughing from gas-damaged lungs, moaning from the medical station, crying though most men try to hide it, screaming when someone gets hit. The particular sounds of pain that tell you exactly how badly someone is hurt. You've learned not to react to these sounds. You keep cooking. Commands being shouted. Warnings being yelled. The whistles that signal attacks or alerts. The sound of boots running when something urgent is happening. The British accent. The Welsh accent. The Scottish accent. The Irish accent. All mixed together in a linguistic stew. At night, different sounds emerge. The distant singing from the German trenches. They sing surprisingly well. Hymns mostly, sometimes folk songs. The British soldiers sing too, though less beautifully. Usually body songs or music hall numbers. On quiet nights, the singing from both sides carries across no man's land, and for a few minutes the war seems distant. The morning sounds are distinct. The first stirring of men waking up, coughing as they emerge from dugouts. The strike of matches as they light their first cigarettes. Your own sounds as you get the fires going. The creak of your cooker as metal expands from the heat. There's one sound you never want to hear. Complete silence. When the artillery stops completely and the rifle fire ceases and everything goes quiet. That silence means something is about to happen. An attack is coming. A gas cloud is drifting in. Something bad. Silence is more terrifying than any explosion. Chapter 29. The black market keeps everyone sane. There's an entire underground economy in the trenches. Officially, everything is supposed to go through proper channels. Unofficially, everyone is trading everything with everyone else all the time. This black market is what keeps the war machine actually functioning. You're part of it whether you want to be or not. You've got access to food, which makes you valuable. Men will trade almost anything for extra rations or better quality food. Cigarettes are the standard currency. A pack of decent cigarettes can get you a lot. A single cigarette can get you a little. Private Murphy is your connection to the wider trading network. He knows a guy who knows a guy who can get things. Need lamp oil? Murphy knows someone in the supply depot who'll trade for tea. Need fresh eggs? There's a French farmer 2 miles back who accepts tobacco. Need clean socks? There's a quartermaster who's willing to look the other way for a bottle of rum. You trade your own things too. Extra tea rations go to a sergeant who controls access to dry firewood. A tin of condensed milk goes to a medic who gives you bandages that you use as rags. A portion of better quality meat goes to the mail courier who makes sure your letters get posted quickly. The French civilians are major players in this economy. They've figured out that British soldiers have things they want. Chocolate, cigarettes, coffee when available. So, the civilians have things the soldiers want. Fresh food, wine, clean water, eggs, cheese. The exchange rate is negotiated individually and changes based on availability. You once traded an entire bag of sugar for a wheel of cheese. Real French cheese, aged properly. You cut it into tiny portions and added it to the evening stew for a week. The men noticed. They didn't ask where it came from. They just appreciated it. That cheese probably improved morale more than any speech from an officer. There's also theft. Not from each other, usually. That's punished severely. But from the supply chain. Fair game. Supplies go missing all the time. A crate falls off a wagon and someone happens to find it. A barrel of something good gets misdelivered. These accidents happen frequently enough to be suspicious and infrequently enough to be deniable. You've learned to hide your best supplies. You've got a secret stash of tea in a waterproof tin buried under the floorboards of your dugout. You've got some decent tobacco wrapped in oilcloth and stuffed inside a hollowed-out beam. You've got a small bottle of brandy that you're saving for a special occasion, though you're not sure what would qualify as special enough. The German soldiers participate in the black market too, though less directly. After a raid, if anyone brings back German rations, they become trading commodities. German sausage is particularly prized. Their black bread is dense and flavorful compared to British rations. There's an unspoken agreement that food captured from the enemy is shared, not hoarded. Officers pretend not to notice the black market. They know it exists. They know it's technically against regulations. But they also know it's necessary. Morale is already low. If men couldn't trade for little luxuries and necessities, it would be even worse. So officers look the other way as long as it doesn't get too blatant. You've built relationships through trading. The baker at a field bakery 3 miles back saves you bread that's still warm in exchange for salt. You send him salt whenever you can spare it. He sends you bread. Neither of you has met face to face. It's all done through intermediaries. But it works. Sometimes the trades are for intangibles. You cook a special meal for someone's birthday. They give you information about when the next supply wagon is coming. You slip extra portions to men who are clearly unwell. They remember this and later they do you favors. It's a web of mutual obligation that helps everyone survive. The military postal service is part of the market too. Getting packages from home is valuable. The contents can be traded. But also, the shipping system itself can be exploited. Want to send something home that's technically not allowed? Find the right postal clerk and trade for looking the other way. There are specialists in the black market. Men who do nothing but facilitate trades. They take a commission, but they're worth it because they know everyone and everything. Need something obscure? They can find it. Want to move something without attracting attention? They know how. You heard a rumor that there's a network that can get you anything for the right price. Fresh fruit, real coffee, new boots, even women, though that's definitely not something you want to think about. Whether the rumor is true or not, the fact that people believe it tells you something about how extensive the black market has become. Chapter 30. The rituals and superstitions multiply. Every man in the trenches develops superstitions. When your life is completely out of your control and death is random and arbitrary, you start looking for patterns. You create rituals. You believe in luck. Because the alternative is accepting that you're completely helpless. Jenkins has a ritual with his tea. Every morning, before he drinks his first cup, he has to take exactly 3 sips and then set it down for 30 seconds. Then he can finish it. He's been doing this since 1914. If anyone asks him why, he says it's because he did it on his first day and he survived, so he keeps doing it. The logic is circular but comforting. Davies never starts a fire without first touching the cooker with both hands. Left hand first, then right hand. He's convinced that if he doesn't do this, the fire won't light properly. You've seen him do this hundreds of times. The fires light fine either way, but he won't risk it. Murphy whistles when he walks. Always the same tune. It's an Irish folk song his mother used to sing. He believes that as long as he's whistling, shells won't land near him. This is obviously not true because shells have landed near him multiple times. But he survived those times while whistling, which reinforces his belief. You have your own superstitions. You always taste the stew with the same ladle. If you use a different ladle, you're convinced the food will turn out badly. You also count the number of times you stir. It has to be an even number, never odd. Odd numbers feel wrong and unlucky. The men you feed have their own rituals. Private Collins always eats his meals in the same spot. Always sits on the same ammunition crate. Always faces the same direction. He's terrified that if he changes his routine, he'll get killed. Sergeant Morrison refuses to eat anything green. Vegetables are fine if they're brown or gray from cooking, but if they're still identifiably green, he won't touch them. Nobody knows why. There's a widespread superstition about lighting 3 cigarettes from the same match. The belief is that lighting the first cigarette alerts a sniper. Lighting the second cigarette lets him aim. Lighting the third cigarette gives him time to fire. Whether this is actually true or not, nobody lights 3 cigarettes from one match. Helmets are never placed on beds or eating surfaces. This brings bad luck. Letters from home must be read immediately, not saved for later. Saving them means you might die before reading them. Never say the words "quiet day," because saying it will immediately make it not quiet. Some men won't wash before going into combat. They believe that dirt and grime provide protective magic. Others wash compulsively before any dangerous activity. believing cleanliness will protect them. Both groups are convinced they're right. There are Lucky Charms everywhere. Pocket Bibles, photographs of loved ones, coins from home, rabbits' feet, four-leaf clovers pressed in letters, medals from before the war. Each man has something that he believes keeps him safe. Rational? No. Comforting? Absolutely. Certain foods are considered lucky. Getting fresh bread means good fortune is coming. Finding an unbroken egg in your rations means you'll survive the next week. Any food that doesn't taste terrible is seen as a positive omen. This makes your job interesting because the quality of the food directly affects morale and superstitious beliefs. There are also unlucky omens. Rats running in certain directions. Birds flying overhead at dawn. The smell of gas when there's no gas attack. Shells landing in a particular pattern. Dreams about home. Any small deviation from routine can be interpreted as a warning of coming danger. Some superstitions are shared across the entire front. Never whistle at night because it attracts shells. Never volunteer for anything. Never say you'll do something after the war because that guarantees you won't survive. Always carry extra socks. Never make plans more than a day in advance. The officers discourage superstition officially. They want soldiers focused on tactics and discipline, not magic rituals. But privately, many officers have their own superstitions. You've seen captains touch their medals before giving orders. You've watched lieutenants arrange their maps in specific patterns before briefings. Religion blends with superstition. Men pray before meals, before sleep, before danger. Are they praying to God or performing a protective ritual? Maybe both. The chaplain holds services, but attendance is spotty. Many men have lost their faith. Others have found it. Most are somewhere in between, hedging their spiritual bets. You've noticed that the longer someone survives, the more elaborate their superstitions become. New arrivals don't have many rituals yet. Veterans have complex systems of beliefs and practices that must be followed exactly. It's as if they're building invisible armor out of routine and belief. The superstitions are irrational but necessary. They give you a sense of control in a situation where you have none. They provide structure and meaning when everything is chaos. They're coping mechanisms, and nobody judges anyone for whatever gets them through another day. Chapter 31. The rare celebrations are bittersweet. Birthdays happen even in war. Someone turns 21 or 30 or 40 while standing in a trench covered in mud. Usually, these pass unnoticed. But sometimes, if supplies allow and the situation permits, you try to acknowledge them. Private Williams turns 20 on a cold February morning. His friends want to do something special. You've got nothing to work with. No cake, no candles, no special ingredients. But you've been saving a small tin of condensed milk. You make a rice pudding, which is just rice cooked in water with the condensed milk stirred in at the end and some sugar. It's not much, but it's sweet and warm and different from the usual fare. You serve it after dinner. 50 men crowd around while Williams gets his portion. Someone starts singing. Others join in. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. The song is off-key and ragged but genuine. Williams tries not to cry. Fails. Cries anyway. Nobody comments on it. It's his birthday and he's still alive, and that's worth celebrating. Christmas is the big one. Christmas 1916 is nothing like the famous Christmas truce of 1914, but there's still an attempt at celebration. The supply wagons bring extra rations. Not much extra, but some. You get plum pudding in tins. You get extra rum rations to distribute. You even get some fresh beef instead of the usual questionable meat. You work for 2 days straight preparing the Christmas meal. The plum pudding needs to be steamed properly. The beef needs to be roasted instead of just boiled. You beg, borrow, and trade to get extras. An onion here, some carrots there, a bit of butter that someone's been hoarding. You're creating something that approaches an actual meal. Christmas morning is quiet. The shelling stops for a few hours. Both sides have agreed to a brief unofficial truce. Men emerge from their dugouts and just exist in the open air without fear of immediate death. Some sing carols. Some just stand there, appreciating being alive. The Christmas lunch is served at noon. You've made roast beef with gravy, mashed turnips, boiled cabbage, the plum pudding for dessert. It's still army food cooked in field conditions, but it's the best meal you've produced in months. The men eat slowly, savoring every bite. Some are crying, some are smiling, some are silent, lost in memories of Christmases past. After the meal, there's singing. Proper organized singing, not the usual bawdy songs. Silent Night, O Come All Ye Faithful. Hymns that everyone knows. You can hear the Germans singing from their trenches. Different songs, but the same sentiment. For a few hours, the war pauses and everyone remembers they're human. By evening, the shelling resumes. Christmas is over. Back to normal. But for one day, there was something beyond mud and death and misery. It matters. It matters more than you can express. Occasionally, there are other celebrations. When news arrives that a soldier's wife has given birth, you try to do something special. An extra portion, a tot of rum, something to mark the moment. When someone receives a promotion, their friends make a fuss. These small acknowledgments of life continuing beyond the war are precious. You celebrate survival milestones too. When someone completes their first month at the front, their first 6 months, their first year. These aren't official celebrations, but the men acknowledge them. You've been here a year, mate. Well done for not getting killed yet. It's dark humor, but it's real affection underneath. The hardest celebrations are when someone is shipping out, going home wounded but alive, or getting transferred to a safer posting, or very rarely getting leave. The men are happy for them but also jealous and sad. You make the best meal you can. You shake their hand. You wish them well. Then you watch them leave and wonder if you'll ever leave. There's an unspoken sadness to all celebrations in the trenches. Because celebrating means acknowledging time passing. Acknowledging that you're still here, still in danger, still far from home. Every birthday is another year lost to war. Every holiday is another reminder of normal life that you're missing. The celebrations are necessary for morale, but they hurt in ways that are hard to articulate. Chapter 32. The fear manifests in strange ways. You're scared all the time. Everyone is. But fear in the trenches doesn't look like fear in movies. It's not dramatic. It's constant and grinding, and it manifests in weird ways. Your hands shake when you're cooking. Not dramatically. Just a slight tremor that makes precision work difficult. You're cutting vegetables and your knife hand isn't quite steady. You're pouring tea and some of it spills. The shaking is worse in the morning and after close shell strikes. It never fully stops. You've developed a nervous habit of checking the sky. Every few minutes you glance up, scanning for incoming shells. This is pointless because you can't see shells coming and you can't dodge them if you could. But you do it anyway. Your neck hurts from constantly looking up. You can't make decisions anymore, not about anything beyond cooking. Someone asks you a simple question like, should we move this crate here or there? And you freeze. Your brain can't process it. You're using all your mental energy to manage the fear, so there's nothing left for trivial decisions. You default to I don't care, you decide for everything. Sleep is when the fear really shows up. You have nightmares every night. Sometimes you're cooking and shells are falling and you can't take cover because the food will burn. Sometimes you're serving food and the men keep coming and you realize you're serving them poison. Sometimes you're just running through mud that gets deeper and deeper until you can't move at all. You wake up gasping, covered in sweat, heart pounding. Your appetite is gone. This is ironic because you're surrounded by food all day. But the smell of cooking makes you nauseous. The thought of eating makes your stomach clench. You force yourself to eat because you need calories to work, but you get no pleasure from it. Food is just fuel and barely that. You've started talking to yourself, muttering instructions under your breath. Stir the pot. Check the fire. Don't burn yourself. It helps you focus, keeps your mind on the immediate task instead of spinning out into panic. The other cooks pretend not to notice, probably because they do the same thing. You flinch at sudden sounds. Someone drops a pot and you throw yourself flat on the ground before your conscious mind can process that it's not a shell. Someone slams a door and you're ducking for cover. Fireworks for celebrations in the rear areas send you into panic attacks. Your body is on constant high alert and can't distinguish real threats from harmless noises. You've become obsessed with contingency plans. If a shell hits the field kitchen, where will you take cover? If gas comes, can you get your mask on in time? If you have to evacuate quickly, what do you grab? You run through these scenarios constantly, planning for disasters that might never happen but probably will. The fear manifests as anger sometimes. Someone makes a minor mistake and you snap at them with disproportionate rage. Someone asks a stupid question and you want to scream. The anger is really fear, but it's easier to express as anger. You apologize later. Everyone understands because they're all doing the same thing. You've developed compulsive behaviors. You check that the fires are banked properly multiple times before sleeping. You count the supplies obsessively. You wash your hands too often, until they're raw and cracked. These rituals create an illusion of control when really you control nothing. Your memory is unreliable now. Someone tells you something important and 5 minutes later you've forgotten it completely. Conversations from yesterday might as well have happened 5 years ago. But you remember random details with perfect clarity. The exact pattern of mud on a specific day. The precise words of a conversation that doesn't matter. Your brain is storing information in broken and useless ways. The worst part of the fear is that you can't talk about it. Admitting you're scared feels like weakness. Soldiers are supposed to be brave. Cooks are supposed to be cheerful and reliable. So you keep it inside. You act normal. You make jokes. You cook the food and serve the men and pretend everything is fine while internally you're screaming. You've watched men break from the fear. Shell shock, they call it. Men who can't stop shaking. Men who stare at nothing for hours. Men who have to be led around like children because they've forgotten how to function. You're terrified of becoming one of them. You're terrified you're already becoming one of them and you just don't realize it yet. The fear has changed your relationship with death. You don't fear dying anymore, not exactly. You fear being wounded and suffering. You fear being buried alive under rubble. You fear being gassed and drowning in your own fluids. You fear all the specific horrible ways that death happens in the trenches. Quick death almost seems preferable to continued fear. But you keep going, because the alternative is giving up, and you're not ready to do that. You cook the food. You serve the men. You manage the fear as best you can. And you hope that someday, somehow, this will end and you'll be able to feel something other than constant terror. Chapter 33. The moments of unexpected beauty are almost painful. In the middle of all this horror and misery and fear, beauty still exists. These moments are rare and fleeting and almost unbearable because they remind you of what you've lost. One morning in early spring, you wake before dawn to start breakfast. You crawl out of your dugout and the sky is clear for the first time in weeks. The stars are still visible. You stand there for a moment, just looking up. The Milky Way is a river of light across the sky. The constellations are sharp and bright in the cold air. For 30 seconds, you forget where you are. You're just a person looking at stars, and it's beautiful. Then a shell explodes somewhere to your left and the moment shatters. But you had it. That brief connection to something beyond the war. It stays with you all day. Another time, you're preparing vegetables and you notice that a bird has built a nest in the support beam above your field kitchen. A small brown bird, you don't know what kind. She's flying in and out, bringing materials. Building a home in the middle of a battlefield. The absurdity of it strikes you. This bird has no idea there's a war happening. She's just living her life, following her instincts, creating new life in a place designed for death. You protect that nest fiercely. You tell the other cooks not to disturb it. When the bird lays eggs and sits on them, you work quietly so you don't scare her. When the eggs hatch and you hear the cheeping of baby birds, it's the best sound you've heard in months. Eventually, the babies fledge and fly away. The nest sits empty, but you leave it there as a reminder that life continues. There's a moment during sunset one evening. The sky turns colors that you've forgotten existed. Deep purple, brilliant orange, pink like a rose. The smoke from artillery adds texture to the clouds, making them dramatic and layered. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time. War creates this beauty through destruction. The contrast is almost too much to process. Music happens sometimes. Someone has a harmonica. Someone else has a decent singing voice. Late at night, after the work is done, there are impromptu concerts. Folk songs. Music hall numbers. Hymns. The music is imperfect and amateur, but it's real human expression. It reminds you that these men aren't just soldiers. They're musicians and singers and people who have lives beyond the war. You witness moments of friendship that are achingly pure. Two soldiers sharing a cigarette, not talking, just sitting together in companionable silence. A big rough soldier gently helping a younger one write a letter home because the kid's hands are too cold to hold the pen steady. Men sharing the contents of packages from home without hesitation or expectation of repayment. These small acts of kindness in a place designed to bring out the worst in humanity. There's a moment when you're cooking and the sun breaks through the clouds and illuminates your work area with golden light. The steam from your pots catches the light and glows. For a second, your field kitchen looks almost magical, like something from a painting. Then the clouds cover the sun again and it's just a hole in the ground with cooking equipment. But you saw it. That brief transformation. Sometimes you overhear conversations that are heartbreakingly normal. Two men arguing about which football team is better. A group debating the proper way to make Yorkshire pudding. Someone describing in elaborate detail the perfect pint of beer and where to get it in London. These conversations about mundane things are beautiful because they're connections to the normal world that still exists somewhere beyond the trenches. You find beauty in craftsmanship too. You watch Davies sharpen a knife with practiced skill, creating a perfect edge. You watch Jenkins taste and adjust seasoning with the precision of a trained chef. You watch Murphy coax a reluctant fire into life through understanding and patience. These are skills applied with care and pride despite everything. The dedication to doing the job well even when it doesn't matter is its own kind of beautiful. There's a moment when you're serving breakfast and you notice a soldier has drawn a picture on the side of his mess tin. It's crude but recognizable. A house, trees, a dog. His home, maybe, or the home he dreams of having. He's carried this mess tin through everything and he's decorated it with hope. You find that almost unbearably beautiful. The beauty hurts because it reminds you of loss. It reminds you that somewhere there's a world where beauty is normal and expected instead of rare and shocking. It reminds you that you used to be a person who noticed beautiful things without feeling like it might break you. The beauty is real, but the pain of recognizing it is real too. You hold on to these moments. You store them in your memory alongside the horrible things. They balance each other out, maybe. They remind you why survival matters. If there's still beauty in the world, even here, even now, then maybe there's hope. Maybe when this is over, you'll be able to appreciate beautiful things again without the accompanying sense of loss. Chapter 34. The relationship with time becomes broken. Time doesn't work normally in the trenches. Days blend together. Hours stretch or compress. Your sense of when things happened becomes completely unreliable. Some days last forever. You wake up at 3 in the morning and start cooking breakfast. By the time you've served everyone and cleaned up, it feels like hours have passed. You check your watch. It's 4:30. 90 minutes. That's impossible. You've lived an entire day in 90 minutes. But that's what the watch says. Other days disappear. You start making lunch and suddenly it's time for dinner and you have no memory of the afternoon. Where did those hours go? What did you do? You must have done something because the work got done, but you can't recall any of it. Time just vanished. The routine is what breaks your sense of time. Every day is identical. Wake up, light fires, make breakfast, clean up, make lunch, clean up, make dinner, clean up, sleep, repeat. When every day is the same, they stop being distinct. Tuesday is indistinguishable from Thursday. Last week might have been 2 weeks ago or yesterday. You genuinely can't tell. You try to track time through events rather than calendar days. That happened 3 supply deliveries ago. That was before the gas attack but after the raid. Events become markers because dates are meaningless. You couldn't tell someone what day of the week it is without checking. The seasons change and that helps somewhat. Winter is cold and miserable. Spring brings mud and slightly less cold. Summer is hot and the smells get worse. Autumn is rain and preparation for winter again. These seasonal markers give you some sense of time's passage, but even they blur together. You've been here for 18 months, but it feels like 18 years, or 18 days, both simultaneously. The time has been infinitely long because every minute of fear and discomfort feels eternal. But it's also been instantaneous because you have no memories of individual days, just one long continuous experience of being in the trenches. Your body's internal clock is broken too. You sleep whenever you can, not on any regular schedule. Sometimes you sleep for 2 hours, sometimes for 10. Sometimes you don't sleep for 2 days straight. Your body doesn't know when it's supposed to be awake or asleep. You're perpetually exhausted and perpetually wired at the same time. Letters from home make time even more confusing. Your mother writes about events in the present tense. But by the time the letter reaches you, those events are weeks or months in the past. She's writing about spring flowers in March, but you're reading it in June. She's describing Christmas preparations, but you're reading it in February. The letters exist in a different timeline from your experience of receiving them. You've stopped thinking about the future. Future planning requires believing in time continuing forward. But you can't imagine next week, let alone next year. The concept of after the war is so distant and theoretical that it might as well be after death. You live entirely in the present moment because that's all your brain can handle. Anniversaries are strange. You know you've been at the front for 18 months because someone told you, but you don't feel like 18 months have passed. You don't feel like any specific amount of time has passed. You just feel like you've always been here and always will be here, and there was never a time before the trenches. The mechanical time of watches and schedules runs parallel to your lived experience of time, but they don't match up. You follow the watch because you have to. Breakfast at this time. Lunch at that time. But internally, you're experiencing time as a fluid, unreliable thing that bears no relationship to the numbers on the watch face. You've developed a strange relationship with memory that affects your perception of time. Recent events feel distant. You remember something from yesterday as if it happened years ago. But events from your childhood feel immediate and fresh. Your brain has reversed the normal relationship between time and memory distance. Sometimes you have moments of clarity where you realize how broken your time sense has become. You suddenly remember that it's 1917 and you've been here since 1916 and only 1 year has passed even though it feels like a lifetime. These moments of clarity are almost worse than the confusion because they force you to confront how much time you've lost. The other cooks experience this too. You'll have conversations where someone says, "Remember last week when..." and they're describing something that happened 3 months ago. Or someone will say, "That just happened about an event that was actually last month." Nobody corrects each other because everyone's time sense is equally broken. You wonder if time will ever feel normal again. If you survive and go home, will days feel like days again? Will a week feel like 7 days instead of one endless stretch or a rapid blur? Will you be able to tell Tuesday from Thursday? You don't know. Right now, you're trapped in this timeless present where nothing ever changes and everything happens simultaneously. Conclusion. So, how's your day been? You spent 2 years standing in freezing mud, breathing smoke, cooking terrible food with equipment from the 1800s, while German artillery tried to kill you. You fed thousands of men with rations that were barely edible and water that was probably contaminated. You dealt with rats the size of cats, lice that drove you insane, and cold that never relented. You saw wounded men. You saw dead men. You survived gas attacks and bombardments and the constant, grinding exhaustion of a job that never ended. But here's the wildest part. You were just a cook. You weren't an infantryman charging across no man's land. You weren't an artilleryman operating a field gun. You weren't a pilot or a tanker or a medic. You were a cook. Your job was to provide a basic human necessity in the most inhumane conditions imaginable. And somehow, despite everything, you did it. The field cooks of World War I are forgotten now. They don't get memorials. They don't get mentioned in history books. But they were essential. Every soldier who went into battle had been fed by a cook. Every man who survived another day was sustained by meals prepared under impossible conditions. The war couldn't have been fought without them. Think about what they endured. Think about standing in a trench at 3 in the morning, trying to light a fire in the rain, knowing you had to feed 250 men breakfast before dawn. Think about cooking stew while shells exploded around you. Think about serving food knowing it was probably contaminated, probably making men sick, but it was all you had to give them. These men kept going, day after day, month after month, year after year. They didn't quit. They didn't abandon their post. They stood in the mud and they cooked and they served and they did their duty even though nobody would remember or thank them for it. So tonight, when you open your refrigerator full of fresh food, maybe say a quiet thank you. Thank you to the cook who stood in the cold Belgian mud making porridge for soldiers. Thank you to the men who risked their lives hauling water and supplies through artillery fire. Thank you to everyone who did the unglamorous, unrecognized work that made survival possible. Your coffee is hot. Your water is clean. Your food is safe. Nobody is trying to kill you while you eat. These are extraordinary luxuries that millions of people throughout history never had, including the field cooks of World War I, who gave their youth and health and sometimes their lives to feed an army. Rest well tonight. You've earned it.